Hey folks, Curtis Stone here. Welcome back to our video series where we're exploring all the provinces of Canada and the states of the US and looking at them from a topographic view of the good, the bad, and the ugly, all through the lens of homesteading as our primary context. And so what makes the best place, or what are some things to consider? So like all this stuff, it's pretty macro. Don't get hung up on the little details of, oh, well, I live in this area and it's not even close to what he said. It's like, yeah, because I can't cover every scenario. Okay, so take that into consideration and take it with a grain of salt in that regard, is that there are going to be exceptions everywhere, but we can only look at, with the time we have in these videos, we're only going to look at the macro things, the macro considerations. And today I'm really excited to do this one. Ontario, Canada. It's where most Canadians live, but it's also very unique in Canada because of its latitude. And Southern Ontario, which is where most Canadians live, is actually a pretty nice climate as far as North America is concerned. You can get up to zone 6B even in some parts of Southern Ontario, and there's, lots of skyline because it's relatively flat, but it is sunny. It is fairly sunny. I mean, now they're just chemtrailing everywhere, so you can't keep up with it all, but it's historically been sunny, and some of the best and most productive farms in Canada are actually in this area. And so often with agricultural presence becomes civilization, because civilization is built off agriculture. And it is, without agriculture, you can't have specialization. So anyways, another topic for another time. I'm diverging a bit, but Southern Ontario, here we go. So, Southern Ontario, from Windsor down to Detroit, all the way up into, Mississauga, is just gridded out, right? And the grids get denser the closer you are to the metropolitan areas. But Southern Ontario is the big sprawl, especially this part, like Western Southern Ontario, say from, the west side of Toronto, basically, or the GTA. And then up here, we get some pretty interesting microclimates and tributaries and lakes, but still this lake effect on Lake Ontario, which gives you a lot of snow, potentially, but also gives you a big flywheel of heat. And that water creates the microclimate that you experience in Southern Ontario. And within that, we can look at other microclimates too. But, this is Ontario. And just for note, if you look at it, for some reason I have Virginia highlighted, ignore that. But if you look at it on the map, like you get flattened out. Look how far south you are down here in Windsor. You're like the equivalent to, center Oregon. So as far as Canada is concerned, that's significant. And so, and all these regions here too, that also benefit from the Greater Lake effect, but get that Atlantic system that comes up through this whole temperate region of the United States. And the greater temperate region being all the, basically the eastern seaboard east of the Mississippi is pretty temperate. Varying degrees, of course. But Ontario benefits from that. And if you know the summers in Southern Ontario, and even Southern Quebec too, all along here, you get rain in the summer, as do people in Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine experience. So you're in this, excuse me, this boreal region, but it is somewhat temperate based on the precipitation cycles it experiences in the summer. Whereas in the boreal climates on the west, that's not the case at all. Our summers are totally dry. They're hot and dry, which is also great for agriculture if you have water. But out here, it creates a pretty fantastic growing climate. And a lot of farms, for many years, didn't need irrigation or didn't totally rely on it. But anyways, I digress. I've been 4 minutes talking about just general Ontario. But let's talk about places to avoid. That's pretty obvious for anybody who lives in Ontario. Pretty much avoid the entire area around the GTA, number one. I would say, we do these circles generically at 50 miles just because speeds up the process. But, I could get in the details here and I would expand this is actually probably pretty accurate. But, to be necessarily that far out of London, Maybe look at it. It's just a big grid. Certainly Detroit, Windsor area, but pretty much avoiding that entire strip of Southern Ontario from Toronto all the way to Detroit. And I would say less so here. We'll look at our good areas next, but there you will find good farms and good homestead properties up in this region. You can see this is this is peri-urban to rural. It's really that simple. The amount of trees and the amount of roads, or the lack of trees and the amount of roads, dictate how peri-urban or urban something will become. And then on the flip side, the inverse in the rural context is the more trees and the less roads dictates how rural you are, and are those roads dirt or concrete. But you can broadly observe these patterns when you look at any topography, especially in topography that have lots of trees. It just becomes easier to see. And so, let's avoid all these big areas. Ottawa, there used to be so many classic, beautiful farms up in this Ottawa Valley area here. But yeah, it's all, the cities are just getting crazy. So let's stay out of the cities. Let's look at some good areas to consider. And so, as you would expect, they're all out of that Southern Ontario region. And when I say Southern Ontario, I'm pretty much talking this whole area from like everything here. We got a couple exceptions here, probably in close to Sarnia or on the other side of the lake here. But this is when I say Southern Ontario, I'm talking about all this pretty much. This whole region is Southern Ontario, and so yeah, get out of that region. These are pretty neat little towns. If you've ever been up here in Southern Ontario, it's quite beautiful because Lake Huron is so huge it feels like an ocean, and so it's a coastal experience in a way, and so it's pretty lovely. Lots of cool towns around here. Owen Sound. Some of our properties that we're going to feature today are in these areas, but just broadly, you have neat microclimates up in these regions too, with being this close to the lake, and it makes these areas really special. Parry Sound is a beautiful area. This is where you start when you get into the northern part of Ontario, which is most of it. When we talk about Northern Ontario, it's all this. And then Southern Ontario is this, but this is where most people in Canada live. I think at least 80% of people in Canada live in this region. And so when you say Northern Ontario, it's very broad, and Ontario stretches, many Canadian provinces, like the equivalent of Alberta to Manitoba is in Ontario. So Ontario is a massive, massive province. But so when we get into these regions, and this is what you experience from pretty much the rest of Ontario, it's only in this really small geographically Southern Ontario region where you don't have what Ontario is actually great for, is small lakes and beautiful forests. And because there's more deciduous trees in Ontario, because it experiences that somewhat temperate effect that those places do in that region, it creates for a beautiful shoulder season. Fall especially is unbelievably gorgeous in any of these regions. And so, yeah, this is where we start to see more of this. So even these two areas here that we're looking at don't have what these guys do, right? That we're on a coastline, and it's peri-urban blocks. There's a little bit of rural area there, but it's mostly one and the same. Now we get up into Parry Sound, and look what we have. This is a very unique coastal experience, similar to the west coast of Canada in Vancouver Island, but because it's not an ocean, it is different. But this is what we're talking about: rural, beautiful microclimates that you could experience in some of these places, and just the access. What's so cool about water lines like this is that they're not just like a line, like a coastline like this, right? There's so much more surface area, thus there's more microclimate potential, and just unbelievably beautiful properties that you would find in here. And there's a town close by, but once you start getting into Northern Ontario, it dramatically changes based on the population density, right? So access to things becomes challenging, where most people just travel back into the GTA, and that's it's not the worst thing. It's not the worst thing. You're well out of it out here. Like, this is a totally different Canadian experience, but looking at some of these places, just beautiful along these lakes. And you do get some topography in this part of southern, Ontario on the Canadian Shield, which can also be a challenge for growing, I'll tell you, is because you can get into some areas that are just so rocky that you can't even put a pitchfork in 4 inches. But you can actually see that from the topography. And so let's look at some of the properties. Well, here, I'll just zoom back here for a second. So way over here towards Kenora and Thunder Bay, these are nice geographical areas. Thunder Bay is a pretty rough town, I will tell you, though. My mom's side of the family is originally from there, and it's pretty rough. My band back in the days when I was in Montreal, we played gigs in some shithole place in Thunder Bay. I forget what it was called, but it's a pretty crusty town. Dryden is probably, it's a lot smaller, but it's better than Thunder Bay as far as, what you've seen on the streets. I'll just put it to you that way. So yeah, let's check out some cool properties here. So Owen Sound. So this is like within those first areas that we looked at. Neat little property. So what we've done here, folks, is we've just singled out a property. This isn't for sale. We just found a property and just said, hey, this looks like a nice little homestead property. So kind of neat thing about this property is you've got an access completely off the road. And this isn't even that much that major of a road. It's just a 2-laner. It's not an expressway or anything like that. A state highway, a provincial highway. So it's offset completely off the road. So you got to come down this. It looks like you come down. Yeah, you probably come through here, and then so you might have an easement from somebody, but you come in here totally off the road. And then look at this, a nice balance of trees and pastures. Like, an area like this, you can pretty much do all of your homesteading in. Okay, so let's just see. I don't know, this looks like a few acres, but I don't know exactly. Yeah, boom. It's almost 5 acres actually. And in fact, you could extend that out here to get your 5 acres for have all your primary homestead infrastructure. So you can essentially do all of your homesteading in this area. There's a great old book called 5 Acres in Independence. And it talks about, a lot of the stuff that everybody reiterates today when it comes to homesteads. But when you're thinking about the infrastructure you want on your homestead, it can all be done here. So in this 5-acre area, you could literally have all the buildings, all the farming. So you could even run a commercial market farm. But besides from that, animals for yourself, not, maybe layers to sell and maybe meat birds to sell, but to sell beef and stuff like that. So it's not practical. You need more land. But essentially to do everything you need for a bona fide homestead that is producing everything you need to live. I mean, within reason. You don't have a salt mine on your homestead, right? But everything you need can be done in that space. So that's what I look for when I look at a plot like this. So this place is only maybe 20 acres. But I can see right here, boom, all the stuff I want for my homestead can be there. And then this is all just lifestyle and experience. And the beautiful thing is, it's probably backed onto Crown land. So in a way, your property is actually all here. Because you're not going to build buildings there anyways. It's too far away from your main homestead. But you can enjoy it. You can go out there. Maybe you can hunt, Huge potential and way to look at a parcel of land and what's really ideal in a homesteading context. Because, when you're homesteading, you're more than just raising animals. You could be hunting. You could be foraging for mushrooms. You could be, getting to benefit firewood from the areas around you. So check out this place here. This is really cool. You got a little bit of beach access there, which is epic. And now this is Canadian Shield, folks. This is what I'm talking about. I mentioned this earlier. This is rocky as hell, Canadian Shield, but it's cool microclimate. You come down here in the summer and this is a water body. This would be a badass place to swim. But you can even see here on the property itself, it's bony. But hey, my place is bony like that too. So it doesn't mean you can't homestead here. So this place, has a little bit less going on, but it still has the bones of what you need. And then you would basically just be clearing a landing here. So essentially, you've got good access, easy access, but off the road so nobody sees the homes. It's actually quite a beautiful place. There's like a mine here, which is really, unless it's something radioactive or something toxic, it's no risk to you. If these are just mining minerals, it's nothing. But still, I might not pick a property here. The guys queued this one up for me, so this was in there. I might not have picked it. I would have, maybe here, So forget about this for a second, because the noise of this might annoy you, actually. And if this is only 20 acres, But anyways, just looking at the bones of the property itself, it's all there. You can see that it's less rocky here because this is a draw. So the water sheds as it rains down through this. And so as it slows down here, where it's steep here, it rolls fast and it's rocky, so the water moves quick. But here it slows down because it's tapers out. That's where there's lots of nice trees and nice soil. And so if you were to farm this place, you might consider actually getting up in that, which actually gives you a bit of a south aspect. And so, but again, it's just logging, you'd come in here. The nice thing about bony ground is it's not muddy. And so your primary road access is through here, which is great. This would be the first place to develop, to put other types of buildings and infrastructure, is to just scrape out this. Because it's hardscape and it'll be easy to develop it as far as pads to build on and put down concrete foundations, and or just build more paths and access. So this would be where you'd want to have all your infrastructure, and then you might have your farm. Maybe you have a farm building along here that gives you access down there or something, but you've got your farm down here. You could even put greenhouses up on this, even high tunnels, because you can just build the soil in. But for fields and things like that, you'd want to have them down there. But anyways, kind of a neat property. Just disregard the fact that it's close to that mine there, which again wouldn't be a threat for you health-wise, unless there was some like sulfur dust or something like that you were breathing in. If they're just mining gravel and sand and stuff like that, it's benign. It would just be noisy. So this place is sweet. This one's a little bit more out of the this is out. This is out fairly good out of Southern Ontario, and we've got a private access, so you got an easement or just that's part of the property. Who knows what it could be. Access to, wow, look at this. This is a banger homestead right here, dude. Holy. This is everything you want in a homestead. Especially if you're like me and you want to do some kind of agricultural thing. Because even if you have a field like this, look at this. You've got all this stuff. So even if you don't want to farm this, you could find a guy who would farm it for you. That's common. That's done commonly. It's probably already arranged that way. So let's say you bought it. They just say, hey, do you want this guy to keep doing this? And you might have some questions for him about how he's farming and this, that, and the other. But if you don't want to use this for something, you should keep farming it, or you're going to put significant effort into changing this, which could involve, a bunch of steps, tilling it, shaping it, doing whatever it is you're going to do. Because it's a good chunk of land, right? Like that's, I don't know. It looks like it's maybe 20 acres or so. No, it's 8. So it's 8 acres. So, you could turn that into a big food forest. That might be a sweet thing to do. Other than that, it should just keep getting farmed if it's just hay cropping. Otherwise, it's just going to be a mess. If you leave this and don't manage it, it's just going to get all full of invasive weeds and it's going to suck and it's going to affect life here. So that's what I would say to that. But this is great. Private access in, a turnaround driveway here and a turnaround driveway there. That's lovely, because then now you can go, okay, well, the business part or the farming part of the homestead could be in this zone, which nobody has a reason to come up here. So you have your privacy, but you've also got that turnaround driveway. This is lovely, man. You got a little marshy kind of pit here, drainage thing. So they probably don't do much there. Or maybe they grow stuff there at a certain time of year, but it looks like it could have been an attempted garden at one point. But you've got all this great area here to utilize. Man, this has it all. This is an A home right here, an A homestead. Beautiful. So yeah, folks, that's a little bit of Ontario. And again, if you guys like these videos, go check out that web class that I have where I show you 3 things so you can avoid making mistakes when you buy a homestead, and I'll kind of show you how to do some tips and tricks in Google Earth as well. There'll be a link to that in the show notes here or in and around the video. All right, we'll see you in the next one.